Previously in the prologue of Uncommon, Book 1 in the Chronicles of the Common series, the Hada refugees were defeated at the Massacre of Ahara, where Lucian and his brother Kai were gravely wounded by their longtime nemesis, the Raqqa mercenary Kerr. And now, Chapter 1, Eva, the rural outskirts of Buffalo, New York, present day. Seriously, who does that, right? I huffed in exasperation. It's Valentine's Day, not Christmas. Who leaves the office at 2 p.m. for Valentine's Day? Pam asked. Every single person at my office, that's who, and not one of them remembered what today was to me. Not one, I said, grateful for Pam's undying support. Sandy even had the nerve to look me straight in the face and say, "It's not like you have anything to do tonight," I mimicked in a condescending tone. There was a brief silence on the other end of the line. "Pam, are you still there?" I asked. "You need to leave that place. That woman is pure evil. I don't know how you do it, but assholes flock to you like you're a damned magnet. Come back to Los Angeles. I'll be your asshole shield. The firm is hiring again. I know Chris would love to have you back," Pam suggested, as she did every time we spoke. However, this time a slight note of worry was in her voice. "I miss our Bad Girls Club. These new girls are all perk and plastic, and they're twigs, Eva. Teeny tiny twigs. I swear you could blow them over with a sneeze. Los Angeles is home. Think of all the good Mexican food you're missing." That was a low blow. They put that fake orange nacho cheese on every so-called Mexican dish here. It's just wrong. A shiver of revulsion swept through me. "Ew! Ugh, please tell me you don't actually eat that," Pam asked as she gave a mock gag across the line. "Hey, when you're desperate, it's better than nothing," I defended. "Did I mention it's a sunny 84 degrees today? Remind me, what's the temp in Buffalo right now?" Pam asked, doubling down on her efforts. I frowned through the windshield wipers, struggling to keep up with the building storm. Damned lake-effect snow. This latest storm was estimated to continue overnight, dumping over a foot of snow. The plow and salt crews were already out in full force. 2, I replied glumly. "I'm sorry, this West Coast girl is confused. Is that 32? Please tell me you don't mean 22. My annoying friend filled her voice with sarcasm. 2, Pam. 0, 1, 2. Just 2. It's a simple number, I flatly shot back. And you know I can't move back. I don't have the money. And to be perfectly honest, I'm not up for the stress of trying to survive layoffs every 3 years. "And you survived every one of them," Pam said. "You're right. I didn't get laid off. No, I got demoted that last round. Frickin' demoted. Why would I want to work 70 hours a week just to go backwards in my career? I'm not going back. I can't go back," I said. "I worry for you," Pam quietly stated. The concern made me pause. I loved Pam dearly, but this was not what I needed today. "I'm going to be fine," I tried to convey the confidence I didn't remotely feel. "I came out here to be with Matt and to start our own business. Matt might be gone, and a lying bastard of a con man, which I did not add. I'm proud to have migrated to only thinking the insults instead of spitting them out every time my fiancé's name was uttered. Baby steps. But that doesn't mean that I can't still have my own business. I'm tired of blindly turning my fate over to a company who doesn't give a damn about me. It's time I stood up and took control of my own life. I just need to figure out what my business will actually be. But I will figure it out." "You go, girl," Pam cheered through the phone speaker. "It's good to hear you back in form. So, what's the plan for tonight?" I flinched. I had intended to get bad Mexican food, but everything is closed due to the storm, so that leaves me with chocolate alcohol and solo karaoke. It's going to be a barn burner, complete party chaos. The neighbors might be forced to call the cops. I tried to keep my voice light to avoid revealing my dread of the coming evening. Yes, it was bordering on a lie, which I had vowed to never do again. However, this was more of an omission rather than an actual lie, so I gave myself a pass, just this once. "Don't worry, my night's not much better. Crap, I have to run to a meeting. Eva, please call me if you need someone tonight. Promise me," Pam demanded. I promise I'll be fine. Talk to you soon." I ended the call after a quick goodbye and double-checked the charger was still attached to the phone on the dash of my small SUV. The storm had forced speeds to a near crawl. At this rate, it would be another hour before reaching my driveway. If the snowfall forced me to a halt, a fully charged phone would be essential. The temptation to switch the charger to the tablet and continue my audiobook in a bid to calm my nerves wasn't helping matters. Unfortunately, the rural 2-lane roads at 40 minutes outside of Buffalo were less likely to see emergency vehicles. Thus, the phone retained its claim to the charger. Double-checking the SUV still had over a half a tank of gas, I settled in for a slow and tense drive. 3 years ago, Buffalo had become my new home, my previous 32 years having been spent in the dry climate of Los Angeles. Although I had grown accustomed to the snow, I much preferred watching it fall from the safety of my small double-wide mobile home. Driving in the stuff still gave me white knuckles and ulcers. Groaning in annoyance, I clutched the steering wheel tighter as the white flakes continued to overwhelm the wipers. There was a time not long ago when I loved to drive, though I would never miss the Los Angeles traffic, where a 5-block commute could last a grueling 20 minutes. Of course, Angelinos could always get out and walk, but high heels and 100-degree weather did not mix well. What I would always miss is the magic of Los Angeles at night. When the city settled into early hours after midnight, I would spend sleepless nights with the convertible top down, wind in my hair, and music blaring through the car. Peace of mind could always be found on my favorite 2-lane road between Los Angeles and Las Vegas. The warm desert air whipping through the open car was a comfort like no other. There was a unique beauty in the isolation of the headlights cutting across the empty desert landscape and swallowed by the black of night for miles in every direction. Back then, on that road, driving was freedom. That was before moving to the outskirts of Buffalo. Here the roads were sloppy and slippery in the winter and then a wildlife obstacle course the remainder of the year. I still wasn't accustomed to seeing the variety of carcasses littering the side of the road. In L.A., the litter tended to be tires, furniture, cans, and the occasional odd shoe. Always a single shoe, never a matched pair. The differences between cultures had been stark at first. In Los Angeles, your neighbor lived mere feet away with bars on the windows. Here, homes stood in privacy, separated by acres of farms and fields of green. In Los Angeles, the cuisine was experimental fusion sold from vibrant food trucks. Here was a local diner with wings and beef on weck. In Los Angeles, life was a rush to get somewhere, to do something, to meet someone. Here, old couples sat on porches and waved to neighbors they didn't know, gossiping about the new girl in town, the one who moved here 3 years ago. Once upon a time, I had thought Los Angeles was home. Now it felt as foreign as the snow-packed roads of my rural little village residence. Everything about life felt foreign, with a single exception. I was alone. That aspect of my life felt quite familiar. I had always prided myself as responsible, self-sufficient, and risk-averse. Those skills had helped pull me from a childhood born to poverty into a 6-figure job in marketing. Naturally, I had attempted to apply the same philosophy to my love life. Unfortunately, the results of my strategic caution did not prove as successful in love as it had in my career. Who knows? Maybe it would have if I had actually stuck to it. With all of the tech geniuses in Silicon Valley, it's a wonder none of them have managed to develop a single app to identify and track the conmen of the world. Con be gone. Now that's a venture I could really get behind, if I still had money, which I didn't. There were a lot of things I no longer had, many thanks to Matt, the dirty, rotten con man. We had met in an online forum and connected instantly. He was carefree and kind, a former cop who gave up the job to work for the family business manufacturing furniture. He was over a decade older than me with 2 beautiful grown children and more life stories than I could ever hope to accumulate. We were exact opposites, and I adored him. In a very uncharacteristic Eva move, I had thrown more than caution to the wind and packed up my life to move across the country and be with the first man I truly loved. Filled with excitement and blinded by romance, I hadn't thought twice before giving up my car, home, friends, and career. Yes, now I'm well aware that I was an idiot, but, as they say, hindsight is 20/20. We had planned a beautiful future with our own online business, a quaint little home, and financial security beholden to no one. Matt had fed my deepest desires and dreams with promises of hope, support, and marital bliss. It wasn't until he had spent my savings and retirement and refused to help build our company that the blinders of love had begun to fall away. I'd been in denial, desperately clinging to the hope that Matt's behavior was merely irresponsible and not intentional. I lost a lot over the last 3 years, but for some reason I was still confident matters would have eventually worked themselves out, until fate decided to intervene. One of the final casualties of our doomed engagement was Matt. He died of a stroke the morning of Valentine's Day, exactly 1 year ago. For months I was an utter mess. I cried and raged, couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. I could barely function. But slowly the fog of morning had begun to thin, and as the clouds dispersed, a new clarity began to form. Conversations from the funeral, papers I found in his drawers, and stories from his children. Dozens of little puzzle pieces shuffled and rotated until a new picture of Matt was revealed, an image that shook me to my core. Everything I had known of my fiancé had been a lie. The bastard had never been a cop. Never! Nearly all of the stories he had told were of his grand old days as a narcotics officer. He had made up an entire fictitious life, filled with elaborate details and anecdotes. In truth, he had been a regularly unemployed electrician, and a terrible one at that, considering he wired half the light switches in our home upside down. For most of Matt's life, he had no need of an actual job. Between parents and the various wives he had conned throughout the years, Matt had lived off the goodwill and gullibility of others. I had been merely the last in a long line of love-desperate idiots. The more deceptions I had uncovered, the angrier I'd become. The last year had been a roller coaster of emotions. Devastation rising into fury that plummeted into self-loathing and then twisted into insecurity. With the closing approach of my first annual circuit on the Widow Express, I felt stripped of all confidence and basic instincts. The final casualty of my relationship with the con man that was Matt? Trust. I may have been an idiot, but I'm damned adaptable. The little dent Matt had made in my life was securely in the rearview mirror. Tonight, the 1-year anniversary of his death, would be my final pity party. Tonight, I'd sing off-key, make a tipsy toast to the past, and mourn my old life one last time. Tomorrow would be a brand new Eva. Almost home, just a few more blocks, 20 minutes at most. You can do this. I tried to console my frayed nerves, rallying confidence for the final home stretch. A distraction, that's what my nerves needed. Anything to take my mind off the tires slipping over the icy roads. Not 10 minutes earlier, my attempt to slowly brake at a stop went miserably wrong. I sat in the driver's seat watching helplessly as the car slid through the vacant intersection, finally coming to a halt more than a dozen feet beyond the other side. I'm not particularly keen on losing control of anything anymore, especially not my own car. I turned on the radio and quickly switched the channel away from politics, which would only aggravate me further. Exhaling a deep breath, I took careful corner, pleased to find the new road had been freshly plowed. Thank God, I breathed a sigh of relief. I smiled and turned up the volume to the classic rock of my childhood, tapping my fingers to the beat and playing them along the steering wheel. I forced a shaking voice to rise with the chorus. Headlights shone ahead just beyond the approaching bridge. Set high and moving swiftly, it had to be the snowplow coming to sweep the opposite side of the road. I held my breath and began to cross the icy bridge. Uncomfortable with the narrow pass, I gently pushed the car forward, hoping to exit before the plow arrived. At the end of the bridge, a flash of brown dashed in front of the headlights, and I instinctually hit the brakes, turning the wheel away from the obstacle. Horror flooded through my veins as tires slid across the road and the car spun directly into the path of the oncoming truck. My head whipped to the passenger's window just in time to witness the truck's angled plow crash into the side of my SUV. The impact threw me into the side of the car, my head cracking against the window. Throbbing pain, metal crunching, a pop of air, Rain of glass, tires sliding, brakes screaming, crisp air caressing my face. The taste of pennies, rotten eggs assaulting my nose. Time distilled to a sensory symphony of impending death. Peeling my eyes open, I attempted to assess the damage over the rapidly deflating airbags. The momentum of the heavy truck had pushed my SUV back down the bridge. The angle of the plow wedged my vehicle against the guardrail, which strained under the pressure. Metal squealed and creaked, then the rail crumbled and finally snapped. Freed from its position between plow and rail, my SUV shot through the opening. Oh, shit! A peaceful split second of weightlessness consumed me just before I was slammed forward, seatbelt carving into my chest as the vehicle came to an abrupt halt. A wild scream ripped from my throat, transforming into a maniacal laugh of disbelief. It looked as though my car was suspended in mid-air. Fear crawled across my skin in beads of sweat and goosebumps, my heart racing to keep up with the adrenaline. Through the empty windshield, not more than 20 feet below, lay the pristine frozen creek. I lifted a shaking hand and pushed aside the airbag to turn off the engine. Then, out of habit, pulled the parking brake. Breath billowed in puffs of clouds through the hole that was once my windshield, issuing a macabre smoke signal into the night. "Ma'am? Hello? Can you hear me?" a man shouted from above. I tried to wet my lips and form words, but my dry mouth merely croaked a quiet "help." Closing my eyes, I flexed my tongue against the floor of my mouth, willing saliva to free speech. Gathering a deep breath, I released a maniacal scream. "Help! You're alive! Oh my God, lady, you are one lucky woman. Did you see that crash? That was insane." The young man's shock turned into relief. "Huh?" My own shock heated to indignation. "Are you kidding me right now? Do you see the car hanging from... Well, I don't know how I'm still hanging here, but hanging is not good. Hanging is very, very bad. Get help. Now." Okay, the man shouted in panic. "I can help. My phone died, but I have a winch on the truck. I just need to turn around, okay?" "Okay, please hurry," I urged. "By the way, you're caught on the guardrail. Lady, it ain't secure but for a hair. I wouldn't hang my dirty shorts on that rusted nail, so maybe don't move," the kid helpfully advised. "Hurry," I demanded. A shiver ran through my body as the adrenaline high began to dissipate. The glacial air clung to my moist skin. Tiny pricks of agony adhered to my face like a biting mask of frozen acupuncture needles. I could hear the young man's heavy steps as he ran back to his truck, and the slam of a car door signaled he had returned to the cab. He started the vehicle and slowly pulled away. As I waited to hear sounds of his return, I realized my entire left side throbbed. His phone died? I thought the crews were required to keep a charged phone at all times. "Just my luck. I get the new kid," I groaned. Miraculously, my phone was still locked in its holder on the dash, cradled between two limp airbags. Exhaling a deep breath, I slowly lifted an arm, reaching for the touchscreen. Metal groaned, and the car gave a slight wobble. I froze. "After. I can call for help after he pulls me up," I mentally scolded. I began to pull back my hand when a whine of twisting metal pierced the silence. My heart seized and plunged to my stomach. The mangled SUV tipped and paused, and then slipped its hold from the guardrail. I clenched my eyes against the biting wind. "Please," I begged. A blinding light burned through my closed eyes, and everything stilled. The frigid wind disappeared. The world was a vacuum save for the light. I heard nothing. I smelled nothing. I felt nothing. I couldn't feel the car or even my injured side. Before I could ponder the peace of death, the moment was over and I resumed falling. My feet suddenly hit solid ground. The jarring impact vibrated up my legs and sent me crumpling to the floor. I lay on the smooth ground waiting for the car to crash on top of me, for an explosion to engulf me, for something, anything to happen. But nothing did. Slowly I opened my eyes. I squinted against the blinding white light, impatient for my eyes to adjust. When everything finally came into focus, I wish it hadn't. I'm in hell. This absolutely has to be hell. Glossy white walls, a white floor, and white ceiling met my astonished gaze. I sat up, leaning my back against the nearest wall. With legs splayed and a slouched spine, I blew the hair from my face to clearly inspect what could only be described as a sterile cage. More likely padded cell, without the padding. You have completely lost it, Eva. The room was small, no larger than 8 square feet. There were no doors, no vents, no furniture, not even a tiny camera to watch me go mad inside this crazy cube. There was also no bathroom, which was going to be a problem in the very near future. I do not have the most durable bladder. Then again, it probably wouldn't be a problem, since there also didn't appear to be any food or water. Maybe bodily necessities weren't required in the afterlife. The wall at my back jolted. My heart jumped into my throat, and I scrambled on hands and knees to the middle of the room. I spun to confront whatever behemoth was able to hit a frickin' wall with enough force to actually move the thing. Pushing the hair from my face, I was stunned by the realization said wall was in fact a glass partition, and on the other side was, well, a behemoth. Standing in a room identical to my own was the largest man I had ever seen. It may have been my perspective, ass flat to the floor and curled back, but he had to be pushing 7 feet. The second thing I noticed was that I must be drooling. He was just a bit too rough to be classically handsome and a bit too lean to be bodybuilder obscene, though the sexy man did have muscles which were on display in his skin-tight bodysuit. His artfully tousled shoulder-length hair and closely trimmed beard made my fingers itch to touch. But what did me in were the eyes. They were the clearest and oddest shade of teal. "Pick up your jaw, Eva." The man crouched, an action I'm sure he did often to make himself less intimidating. He lifted a brow and smiled. I suddenly found my new favorite feature on the man. Goodness, his smile could melt panties. Well, if I'm going to starve in hell, at least they gave me eye candy. I closed my eyes and shook my head, sighing at my obvious insanity. Breathing out a calming breath, I opened my eyes and slowly got to my feet. He may have a mouth-watering smile, but caution seemed in order, since this was presumably hell. So I held to my spot in the middle of the room. The man stayed in his crouch, arms braced on his knees and hands dangling between his legs. He narrowed his eyes and took my measure from head to toe and back again. He stared into my eyes, appearing to ponder my existence. Then his mouth moved, and all I heard was silence. Yep, definitely hell. I shook my head and pointed to my ear. The man abruptly stood, his chest heaved with a breath, and then he looked away. I watched him as he confidently walked the circumference of his side of our pristine cage. He inspected every inch of the cell, stalking and hunting for something, but he eventually found himself back in front of the glass, staring at me. I slowly approached the glass, ready to jump back at his slightest movement. He merely watched. When I reached within a foot of the glass, I stopped, craning my neck to look into his strange teal eyes. I never realized how intimate a mere 24 inches could be, even with the glass wall between us. We were definitely standing within that uncomfortable buffer space we all tried to maintain. But where most invasions into our personal space produce the nauseating urge to step away, this intrusion held electricity that crawled down my spine and made my eyelids go limp. It bugged the heck out of me. I quickly broke eye contact and feigned the action as intentional by looking down the glass wall. I gazed curiously, cocking my head to the side as if inspecting for some invisible door to magically appear simply because I looked for it. Needing an extra minute to gather my wits, I repeated the action down the opposite side. Nope, still just a glass wall, but at least my hormones are in check. I dared a glance back at the giant of a man who was clearly smirking at me. He lifted a brow as if to say, "Did you think you could find something that I could not?" Great, I'm locked in a cell with arrogant eye candy. This is most definitely hell. I casually lifted a shoulder in a shrug and ignored his amused expression. His body shook with suppressed laughter. I gave him my best "don't be an asshat" glare. He politely sobered, which went a long way to scoring trust points. I decided it was time to try to communicate properly. I hate charades. Unfortunately, I needed to know where I was and how the heck we both got to this place. I made a dramatic show of shrugging my shoulders and pointing to the floor. His eyes narrowed, but he watched me closely as I repeated the action. His mouth made an expression of understanding, and he quickly shrugged his own shoulders and shook his head. Okay, so he doesn't know where we are. I theatrically shrugged my shoulders again, pointing at him, and then pointed at the ground. He nodded once, acknowledging the question, pointed at himself, and then closed his eyes, tilting his head to the side and breathing heavily, his massive chest rising and falling evenly. Sleeping? He was sleeping when he got here? That detail did me absolutely no good. Did the man die in his sleep and he just didn't know it? I had honestly expected a drawn-out display of mimed fighting or a deep-sea diving accident. Sleeping was not at all what I expected. The man returned my mime, asking how I got here. This was going to be a much more challenging explanation. I held my fists in front of me and sawed them up and down as if driving a car, then quickly clapped them together and apart to illustrate the accident. I chose to leave out the bridge incident, which would have required a master level of charades when I was still trudging through novice. Instead, I closed my eyes and tilted my head, hanging my tongue out of my mouth as I held my breath. Hopefully the man was working at a master level in charades and understood my impression of death. His brow furrowed in confusion. He slowly shook his head. I pressed my lips firmly together and nodded, confirming my unpleasant and untimely demise, which I was proud to note I was handling exceptionally well. Bravo, Eva, 2 points for poise while perishing. The man visibly huffed and shook his head more forcefully. Oh, come on, I shouted, propping my hands on my hips. Why would I lie about being dead? Again he narrowed his eyes at me in speculation. He slowly pointed at me, then slammed his hands into his chest and threw his head to the side, eyes closed, and held his breath. After a second he peeked an eye open to look at me. One side of my mouth lifted in an uncontrollable smile. I firmly nodded in confirmation. Dead, I stated. He waved his hands up and down my body, noting my uninjured and obviously alive appearance. I shrugged. He shook his head in disbelief and mouthed something I couldn't understand. I ran out of patience. I was not going to spend eternity in hell defending my death in charades. We stood and simply stared at each other, realizing there was nothing more to say. Neither of us knew where we were or how we got here. It wasn't as if we could pass the time sharing our life stories. Well, I suppose we could, but I had no desire to become fluent in mime. With nothing left to do, I copied the man's actions and inspected my gleaming white cube home. The walls were made of a seamless panel of highly polished material similar to a plastic or epoxy, making the harsh light cast an obnoxious glare over the surface. Light? I went back to the middle of the room and stood below the light source. Squinting, I tried to discern the details, but the damned thing was like looking into the sun. I couldn't tell what shape it was or even if it could be dismantled. All I could see was an immensely bright light that seemed to illuminate every corner of the room equally. Stretching on my toes, I reached for the light. My fingers appeared to penetrate the source, but I felt absolutely nothing. Spots danced across my vision, and I cursed the stupidity of risking blindness. This may be hell, but I had eye candy to ogle. Come to think of it, there was one charade I wouldn't mind watching, I thought with a chuckle. I looked back through the glass to the mouth-watering man on the other side. From head to toe, he was my ideal fantasy come to life. Or, rather, death. Leave it to me to find the man of my dreams rotting in hell. Subscribe to continue listening and discover how Eva finds her way out of the mysterious White Room. If you liked what you heard, the Uncommon ebook can be purchased at all major retailers for only 99 cents. Thank you for listening.